The lost generation. The lost generation refers to people who were born before and, according to some sources, during the First World War. Depending on different estimates, this includes those born roughly between 1883 and 1900 or 1890 to 1901. A defining feature of this generation is that many of its representatives were unable to adapt to peaceful civilian life after the war and to the radically changed post-war reality. Eric Maria Remarque also characterizes this lost generation. These were tough, decisive people who recognized only practical help, were ironic, including in their attitudes toward women. The lost generation faced challenges similar to those confronting today's youth: pandemics, difficult economic conditions, and major socio-cultural changes. The Greatest Generation. The Greatest Generation is a collective term introduced by the American journalist Tom Brokaw to describe the generation that grew up during the Great Depression and later fought in World War II or worked on the home front. The term was proposed in 1998 as the title of Brokaw's book, The Greatest Generation. In his book, Brokaw wrote that this was, in his opinion, the greatest generation ever produced by society. According to him, none of the men and women of this generation fought for glory or recognition. They fought for what they believed was right. It is not surprising that the Greatest Generation is also known as the World War II generation. Not only the war influenced their lives, but also technological progress. The mass spread of radio, cinema, automobiles, and the development of mass culture and the entertainment industry, film, literature, visual arts, and music. Their active years coincided with the so-called golden age of Hollywood. The Silent Generation. The Silent Generation refers to people born approximately between 1928 and 1945. It is also called the Quiet Generation. Their parents' lives were shaped by enormous hardships, the greatest global economic crisis in history, and the most destructive and large-scale war. Perhaps for this reason, when they reached adulthood in the 1950s, they became leaders of the civil rights movement and at the same time formed the silent majority, while also creating rock and roll music of the 1950s and 1960s. The most striking fact about the young people of this generation is their silence. With rare exceptions, youth stayed away from public tribunes. Compared to the fiery youth of their parents, the younger generation appeared calm and restrained. In the USSR, the silent generation was represented by the 60ers. The silent generation never rose up in a single unified protest. It was heterogeneous, and while relying on a silent majority, also produced representatives of the Beat Generation, Still Yagi, bikers, and other subcultures. The Baby Boomer Generation. The Baby Boomer Generation, or simply Boomers, gets its name from the surge in birth rates that occurred after World War II, known as the baby boom. The coming of age of baby boomers was influenced by post-war economic recovery and the Cold War. They witnessed the launch of the first artificial satellite and the landing of humans on the moon. At the core of their values lies the so-called winner's psychology. This generation includes people born between 1944 and 1967. During their lives, a consumer society was established. Household appliances and technologies that were once available only to elites, refrigerators, televisions, washing machines, telephones, and more, became common in every home. It was a time of optimism, economic prosperity, and the growth of the middle class. Culturally, boomers left a contradictory legacy. On one hand, they were a generation of traditional family values, marrying early and having many children. On the other hand, they actively participated in protests, created countercultural movements, fought for women's rights and against discrimination, played and listened to rock music, organized a powerful anti-war movement, launched the sexual revolution, and radically transformed global culture. Boomers tend to feel that they lived at the peak of history, and since they experienced a world where life constantly improved, it is often difficult for them to understand today's youth, who face stagnation and decline in many areas of modern society. Generation X. Generation X is a term applied to people born approximately between 1965 and 1980. This generation emerged during a decline in birth rates following the demographic boom. Various factors shaped Generation X: dissatisfaction with authorities, lack of trust in leadership, political indifference, rising divorce rates, an increase in working single mothers, cuts in education funding, difficulties accessing student loans, environmental problems, the creation of the internet, and the end of the Cold War. Generation X experienced the peak of its social life at a time when technologies were rapidly and repeatedly changing, triggering major social transformations. This generation knows life before the internet and can compare the advantages and disadvantages of information technologies and the pace of their development. There will never again be a generation like this in history. Generation Y. Generation Y, also known as millennials, the net generation, or the network generation, includes people born approximately between 1981 and 1996. They encountered the new millennium at a young age. They are primarily characterized by deep involvement in digital technologies and are often called the first truly global generation, as they grew up connected to the global information network, the internet. They are also referred to as the unlucky generation, or the Peter Pan generation, because many of its members tend to delay the transition into adulthood and remain living in their parents' homes longer than previous generations. The root causes of this trend are largely economic: the global financial crisis, rising housing costs, and unemployment. Self-expression is extremely important to this generation. For example, in China, with its population of over 1 billion, the desire to stand out and be individual has become a cornerstone of youth culture. Thanks to internet access, people assert themselves in online role-playing games, such as MMORPGs, in virtual worlds like World of Warcraft and Second Life. The most expressive representatives of Generation Y gained recognition by organizing online communities, launching internet memes, or creating flash mobs. More socially reserved individuals found themselves in anonymous online communication, which allows greater freedom of expression. This generation adapts poorly to hierarchical structures and bureaucratic decision-making. They expect professional skill development and do not want to stay in the same position for long periods. Generation Z. Generation Z, often called Zoomers, refers to people born approximately between 1997 and 2012. Some researchers believe they were born between 2000 and 2006, but it is impossible to define exact boundaries until all representatives reach adulthood. Members of Generation Z actively use tablets and smartphones. In their conscious lifetime, the internet is no longer limited to home computers and is accessible almost anywhere at any time. The term Generation Z is often considered synonymous with the concept of the digital human. Zoomers are described as being interested in creativity, saving resources, and sustainable development. They are considered sensitive and hardworking, and many prefer spending time at home. The values and traits of Generation Z are still forming and are not yet fully established. The global pandemic has had a significant impact on them, disrupting the development of socialization skills. Generation Alpha. Generation Alpha is a term used for people born approximately from the early or mid-2010s to the mid-2020s. During the birth period of Generation Alpha, many countries experience declining birth rates. In childhood, entertainment is increasingly dominated by smart technologies, social networks, and streaming services, while interest in traditional television is decreasing. Changes in the use of technology in classrooms and other areas of life have influenced how this generation experiences education compared to previous ones. Studies show that allergies, obesity, and health problems related to screen time have become increasingly common among Alpha children in recent years. Generation Alpha is expected to become the most numerous generation in history. By 2025, there will be over 2 billion of them. Most Alphas come from China, India, and Indonesia, marking the approach of the Asian century. Modern children will have longer life expectancy, better material well-being, and more diverse culture in adulthood.